Hello, Erica here, and as promised when I talked about short story collections earlier this month in a video that I will link down below, I'm doing a video which I am tentatively calling Short Stories for People Who Are Scared of Short Stories. Could also be known as Short Stories, Where to Begin with Them, and we could name it a lot of things. I don't really know what it's going to end up being called, but I'm here today to recommend 5 collections of short stories that I think could be gateway books for someone who either hasn't enjoyed reading short stories as a form in the past, or someone who just doesn't know where to start because it's kind of overwhelming. So, we are going to do that today. First, I have 3 books that really walk the line, and it's a very thin line, between a novel and a collection of short stories. Some people have categorized them as novels, and some people have categorized them as short stories. So the first one I have is All of Kitteridge by Elizabeth Trot. This won the Pulitzer Prize a few years ago, and it is a very, very excellent book that tells the story of this character, Olive Kitteridge, who lives in a really quiet town in New England, through the perspective of many other characters. So the way this book is broken up is that every chapter kind of follows a different character. Some of them appear more than once, and some of them interact with Olive Kitteridge. Some of them are very close to her. She makes an appearance as herself, of course, as the narrative voice. But it all kind of comes together to tell the story of her life through these moments and these lives of other characters. I found this to be really beautifully written. I put it off for a long time, and I'm not really sure why. And a lot of people consider it a novel, and it's hard to draw that line because all of the stories are kind of interconnected, but some of them are very vaguely connected to what else is going on. So it tells a complete story, but you have to piece it together yourself. And that's something that I really enjoy in short story collections, is that a lot of times the author's trying to tell you something, they're trying to convey some message or some theme, but you have to piece it together through all these individual stories. So I would highly recommend picking this up if you're kind of interested in, like I said, a gateway book to short story collections. The next book I have is also more frequently considered a novel, but to me it read like a book of short stories, and I read this just recently. This is Claire of the Sea Light by Edwige. I have a full review of this, which I'll link below. But this is a story of a girl named Claire who goes missing on the eve of her 7th birthday in a Haitian town. And again, every chapter is kind of from a different character's perspective, and this one, instead of telling the story really of Claire, tells the story of a town. And it kind of pieces together all these different members of society from all different economic backgrounds and how they make up this small Haitian town. Again, I have a review of this, so if you want to hear more, you can go there, but I noted in my review that this kind of read like a book of short stories, even though it's considered a novel. So I think that this would be a good book for somebody to pick up if they're looking to kind of toy with that line between the forms. The last one I have in this category is The Beggar Made by Alice Munro. This is categorized as short stories more often than not, but I think that may only be due to Alice Munro being so famous as a writer of short stories. Because this one read similarly to the previous 2, where the chapters kind of tell a story. So I've seen on other editions the subtitle of this book being Stories of Flo and Rose, and it is the story of Flo and Rose. Flo is Rose's stepmother, and you never get stories from Flo's perspective, per se. I don't remember. If you do, it's not very many. Most of it's from Rose's perspective. But the stories jump around in time, and they ultimately come together to form a picture of these characters' lives and their relationship. Again, I reviewed this, and I will link that down below. But again, I think this is a wonderful place to start with short stories. I think you can't go wrong with Alice Munro. I also think this is a really good place to start with Alice Munro, on that note. And yeah, I hope you'll pick it up. Lastly, I have 2 collections that are definitely just short story collections. There's nothing really blurry going on here. The first one I really recently read, like last week, and that's The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. This is a collection of fairy tale retellings, And they're kind of feminist takes on the fairy tales, but also very dark and sometimes violent takes on fairy tales. And I don't read a lot of fairy tale retellings, but I really enjoyed this. And I think that that kind of familiar fairy tale-esque tone and kind of the familiarity of the tropes and the characters that you see in this book could really make this an easy and very accessible collection of short stories. Not to mention that it's pretty short and it's kind of a classic. So I, again, would really recommend this. Lastly, I have Can't and Won't by Lydia Davis. Lydia Davis does something interesting where I feel like her stories kind of walk the line between poems and stories. And it's not that they're prose poems, because that's not right, but her stories are very, very short. I will show you. So, I read this whole book in like one sitting because almost every page is just like that. But they're really, really interesting, and I would love to get my hands on her collected short stories because I'm fascinated by her now. And this is a book that I didn't appreciate until long after I had read it and had kind of let it sink in, had thought about it continuously. But I just think that it's so, so well done. I will read you one of the stories because it's very short. On Wednesday mornings early, there's always a racket out there on the road. It wakes me up and I always wonder what it is. It is always the trash collection truck picking up the trash. The truck comes every Wednesday morning early. It always wakes me up. I always wonder what it is. So there's a whole story there. And it's kind of like that story that's attributed to Hemingway, but nobody knows if Hemingway actually wrote it, about the baby shoes for sale. You know what I'm talking about? That's kind of how her stories work, in that you could fly through them and you could give no more thought to them than what you read and just take it at its face value. Or you can really sit and think about it, and I really liked that about this collection. There are some longer stories in here as well, some more kind of standard-sized stories, but a lot of them are very short and very to the point. So this, I feel like, would be fun because it's definitely not going to drag on, and it's really accessible and just very, very interesting what Lydia Davis does with the form. So those are all the recommendations I have for you today. I'm sure I could find more if I really wanted to. If you've read any of these or have any questions, please let me know. If you are a lover of short stories and can think of any good collections that would be good for somebody looking to get into reading short stories. God, that's a really convoluted sentence. Again, please let me know in the comments. And I will see you all next time. Bye!